everyone. Today I have a great occasion to talk to Arnold Hovén from Öhlins Racing. And Arnold, please introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you for having me here. My name is Arnold Hovén. I currently have a position as IT Director for the Öhlins business area in an American company called Tenneco. And I've been with Öhlins for 30 years in various positions, so I'm not a career IT guy. I spent the last 6 years 100% in IT. Before that, I held positions as a lab engineer, software developer. I've been a site manager, operations manager, IP manager. And IP, then I don't talk about IP addresses, I talk about intellectual property.
I guess.
And then I was chief engineer for a product area for a while as well.
You mean engineer, not in the software, but
no, in actually in shock absorber technology engineering, especially related to valve technology for electronically controlled shock absorbers.
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, this background, this connection with real things, it's important when you now propose some changes and optimizations related to your company. Yeah. Talking about which, you know, we know what Öhlins Racing does, but could you quickly present your company, you know, to the wider audience?
Öhlins is a company that provides advanced suspension technology, and we do that particularly for motorcycle, for mountain bikes, and also for cars. So I would say that the person anywhere in the world that has an interest in motorcycles or racing would know the brand name, but if you don't have that interest, you're completely unknown. We are completely unknown.
So could you tell us, maybe, have you ever counted how many times people who use your suspension on motorbikes or in cars won the race?
Yeah, since the company was founded back in 1976, I think we have a little bit over 400 world championship titles won with Öhlins products on the vehicle.
Wow, 400.
Yep.
It's a lot. Okay, I'm impressed. And do you have maybe spectacular customers or partnerships that you can share with us?
Currently, we have a technical partnership with Scuderia Ferrari in Formula One.
Wow.
We work with most of the teams in MotoGP, motorcycle racing.
Yeah.
And next year will actually be the first time we expect Öhlins products to appear in the Olympic Games.
Whoa.
On the mountain bike.
Which great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It says a lot about your company. But I would like to ask the last question regarding your company. What's the company size? I mean, in how many countries you are? How many sites you have, maybe?
Yeah, we are in total in the Öhlins business area about 500 employees. We have sites in Sweden, Germany, United States, Thailand, and Taiwan. And most of our sales on the aftermarket takes place through distributors and dealers who are represented in, I think it's like 62 countries all over the world.
Yeah, that's a pretty big scale. Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. It's an introduction. Look, you referred to your professional career, and you know you referred to your different positions that you had in the past. Now, if you could, you are currently running the IT director position, and IT is a broad, definition. People perceive it differently. Some people think about the hardware and network and servers, and some people think about IT as a extension to the business, and this is, I believe, where it should be actually. How do you position IT, your role in your organization?
The role I've had for the Öhlins business area was basically called an IT business partner, meaning that I was supposed to be the link between IT and the business. Now I also happen to run all IT delivery for Öhlins, so it's kind of a dual role I have.
Yeah.
But the way I view things is that Öhlins is not an IT company. So my view is that IT is everything to the business, but we are nothing without the business. IT and Öhlins, we are there to support the business processes, and the way to make business. So I kind of make a statement when I talk to a manager in there that there is nothing you can do. There is no business initiative today which doesn't have an IT component anymore. So please come talk to us first before you take off on a path without knowing.
Let me connect to that, because you said please come to us first. Is it sometimes that you as IT, you propose the changes that you observe? I mean, being proactive?
Sometimes we do, but to be able to do that, you really need to have a very in-depth knowledge of the business processes.
And the current needs and the market demand and so on. Yeah, okay.
I don't really believe in the idea that IT should run the business. I keep telling people that if you let me in IT make the decisions on how you're going to run your part of Öhlins, you will probably be very disappointed.
Yeah, I didn't mean that you should, guide them on how to lead the business, but sometimes there are new emerging technologies like, for instance, we talk a lot about generative AI right now, and this is the part that you can actually analyze and bring into the business and show, look, this is how it works, and these are the limitations. For sure, we have limitations there, and do whatever you want with that. But my role is to propose you and inform you about it. So, do you also perceive this as a part of your job?
It for sure is to always scan the market for new technologies and new things that could be of value to the business. Always keeping in mind that the business is never really interested in the technology part of it. They're interested in the benefits that the technology can actually bring.
So who converts the new capabilities that come with together with the new technologies into potential implementation areas? Because it's especially hard sometimes for the people to you see the tool, but you don't know how to apply it in your particular context. Who does this in your organization?
It has to be a cooperation between people who has the IT knowledge and the business knowledge. And basically you need to have people in the organization who are bilingual now. I don't mean that they speak different languages in the ways of English, German or Swedish. I'm talking about you need to be able to speak both the IT lingo and the business lingo to make an impact when it comes to really launching new features that will bring added capabilities to the business.
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably a very important role nowadays in all organizations. As you said, you can't change your business without the IT, without software, without systems, right? Yeah. Okay. You said they come to you and they request for something. So it usually starts with they observe some problem, or they have some challenges, or maybe they have a vision of the future state. They know what they, maybe not precisely, but they know something that they want to achieve, and they come to you. Now, there is a whole process from that moment to the moment when you can say, okay, we observe benefits, some results, right? Let me quickly describe it. So you firstly probably analyze the problem or the situation, you probably measure it or whatever. Then you prepare, you analyze the potential solutions, then you implement the solution. Firstly, you design, and then you build applications. Of course, we talk about applications. Then you do the deployment, and you support the go live, and after go live, activities. And it, of course, requires a lot of attention to support users and so on. So, where are you in this process? In all the stages, or maybe it's you mainly focus on implementing applications?
No, I think that to be an efficient IT organization supporting the business, you have to be present in all of these situations. And I really love it when people come to me and start talking about issues they have or new capabilities they need to create. Because then you can kick off the process by really saying, okay, to really change something here and understand what we are doing, we first need to describe the current situation, the as-is situation. Then we should have some idea of our to-be situation. This is what we would like it to be. And then in the end, if you want the company to fund this, we should probably also present some expected benefits of doing this. What always frustrates people, it frustrates me and most of my colleagues in IT, is when somebody comes, hey, I found this brand new tool, great tool I want to buy. And then you have to sort, okay, let's take one step back and find out how this is actually going to bring benefit with the business. I have a colleague, which I steal a phrase from all the time. A fool with a tool is still a fool. So the tool won't solve the problem, but identifying the capability you need or the problem you need to solve, then scan for the tools and then implement them. Then you can really make an impact.
And I have a relevant question, I think, because I observe the same. I mean, people are usually very motivated and excited about the new tools. So they think when I purchase the tool, it will solve all my problems. It doesn't happen because you first need to think about processes, right, and so on, so on. Now, we know that you use Novacura Flow, which is our product, but also this is low-code platform, and you can create your own application. You simply look at the processes that you want to have, and you map it onto the application behavior, and then you can build the application in exactly the way you want to have. Now, you have the same tool all the time because it's the platform, but you can build multiple applications. And do you feel that this really limits the need for additional tools that you purchase and then it lies on the shelf, because you can start from defining processes because tool is already there. Do you work like this?
We really like to first understand the business needs before you set off a path to invest in a tool.
Yeah.
And typically, what they call the puppy syndrome.
Please explain.
Yeah. It means that your kids want a puppy, and then you buy the puppy, and then later on you realize that the cost for the puppy, that was only a small part of the total cost to get this done. And it's exactly the same thing when you start to implement new tools.
Yeah.
And unless you want to end up with a huge amount of different software tools running in a company, you should really have the rule of, okay, if we're going to bring in something new, which one of our previous darlings should we kill?
Yeah. I love this because it's all about simplicity. I mean, to keep the company simple, you need to limit number of options, systems, integrations, and so on. It's a consequence of that. Okay, so you said you exist in all these areas from the process analysis and problem analysis up until the post go live implementation and probably changes implemented after. Now, if you could look at it once again, and which of these stages is maybe the most important for you? To achieve some goals like optimization, right?
The most important step is the very early stages. You take off in the right direction and don't go down the wrong path. Mm-hmm. I compare this. I had a manager in the past who also was a pilot, and he said that when you train pilots, you get taught this, that if you don't know what to do, just wait and think. Because if you do something and do the wrong thing, then you have tripled your workload. Because you have first done something, then you have to correct what you've done wrong, and then you have to do the correct thing. Yeah. So we also had a quality manager at the company who said that what you really need to do is to think carefully and get things right at the first attempt, which is a challenge.
And I guess do the things right at the first attempt, it's not always true, and it's probably hard to achieve that because you usually need to implement kind of incremental approach or continuous improvement approach where you actually launch something. It's like MVP, we call it nowadays, limited to some extent. Still, it supports your processes, but then you need to, I guess, come back to what has been just deployed and take a look at the processes and talk to users, right, and improve it. Does it also apply in your daily work?
Absolutely. I worked a lot with people from Japan. Öhlins was majority owned by a Japanese company for many years. We had a very important supplier over in Japan. And when you look at what Toyota has achieved, there's a lot of things to learn there. And I love their approach that they call the Toyota Kata, which really is talking about that. You need to have a vision. This is the vision where we want to go. But a vision is hardly achievable in a planned manner. Yeah. Or you can set a time frame to it. So then you have to take one step back and create a challenge. And when you know the challenge, then you have to go back and look at where are we now? And from that point, you have to set some kind of target that is achievable within a reasonable time frame. And sometimes that could be half a day. Other times it could be a week, but it's definitely not half a year. And then you start experimentation to find a solution. And that approach is actually not so far from what we call the agile approach in IT.
Well, agile might be a misleading word because, we have a lot of bad connotations with that sometimes. But I would rather prefer to say lean because when you look at Japanese definition of lean management, it's all about being better in the next day versus the previous day, right? Yeah. And it's exactly what you're referring to, I guess. Yeah.
It's all about continuous improvement and find those small changes that actually have a huge impact. And what I really liked about the Toyota Kata approach is two other things, that they don't focus on the results, they focus on the learning. What did we learn from the experimentation we did? So that you actually learn. And the second thing is that they have something called target conditions. I'm not sure I have actually grasped what that is about. But for me, the difference between a target condition and a target is something you achieve. A target condition is when you have built the process, so it can achieve the same result, predictable again and again.
Yeah, in a repetitive way. Yeah, sometimes you achieve the goal because it's like a brute force method, but the challenge is to repeat it constantly, be predictable and so on. You said one thing. You said that sometimes we talk about little changes that have, when you count them after a year or 2 years, it's a lot of these small little changes that really matter when you compare your state versus the state that you had like 2 years ago. Could you refer to some like specific examples, like, you know, I especially like the little changes, like, you know, you add like one more button and one more question in the application, and thanks to that you achieve a lot. Small change, big achievement. Can you recall some of these?
Yeah, I have two good examples. There was a lot of talk the other day here about people always have an opinion about buttons and button sizes and button positions, and we joke a bit about in IT, but it's actually very important.
Right.
You don't want to have a user interface where you have put the cancel button in a place so you accidentally hit it 50% of the times when you're looking for the confirm button.
Yeah.
That's one example. And then I have one from the very early days. This was back in the 80s. We were building a piece of software for a person that basically never used a PC before. And the person said, it's completely unpredictable. I can't get it to do what it wants. It's random. And we troubleshooted the software for, I think, a day and a half. And then we went there looking, actually practice Genshi Genbutsu, the Toyota method of actual place actual thing. And then we realized that when this person was going to hit Control F4, it did like this. So 50% of the time it was Control F4, and the other 50% it was F4.
Yeah. And
so just going there and look would have spared us a day and a half of troubleshooting.
But look, this is purely an IT area, because it's all about the computer and the user and how they use it. But I think the same approach, when you sit at the ground and you observe real processes before you start proposing something, is also crucial when you propose changes that affect, I don't know, warehouse processes. This is one of the core areas of your activity, right? You improve warehouse processes, shipment processes, core operations like productions, right? All this stuff around. So are you also involved in observing these real processes? Do you talk to real people working there, or you have like separate department like business people, I don't know, warehouse manager who does this job for you?
Ideally, I prefer the ownership of, let me say, the business value of the IT solutions to be in the business, that they own this and take ownership over it. But you still have to go look for yourself and see what is actually happening there. It's always a learning experience. I took the chance when I got it a year and a half ago to spend one day myself working in production area in our plant, and I learned a lot. And we actually fixed a few issues very quickly after that.
I think the usability of all applications and solutions, sometimes it's not about, you know, particular window of application, but it's about the entire ecosystem where you have the tablet, is it in front of you or not? When you spend an hour on the work center, you could learn much more than after analyzing hundreds of, you know, tiny little user requests in your system, right? Talking about which, you know, it's a very common situation in companies that IT departments have a lot of requests, like improvement requests in their like catalog or list or in the system, and they try to prioritize it and, you know, put it into a queue, and there are really limited resources to develop and implement these requests in real applications. Basically because they have like ERP vendors and they are not so eager and effective in, you know, implementing these. So it takes forever. As a consequence, what I observe is that real users, they become frustrated and they don't propose any new changes. They talk to each other, or when you talk to them, they say, you know, we don't even propose these. Yeah, it's a frustrating functionality, but we don't propose a change because they will never deliver. Now, do you have the same situation, or maybe, I hope, because of Novacura Flow and the ability to, you know, the flexibility in it and ability to change things rapidly, people still arrive to you and you know, ask for like changes? Yeah,
we get a lot of requests. And that is because we are able to respond to them.
Yeah.
And what I did is, and where products like Novacura Flow actually fits the way I view things, is that when I ran the Öhlins R&D organization in Jönköping, we realized that if we were going to be really efficient, because what we were doing required a lot of experimentation, we need to have everything needed to complete the development cycle in-house. We need to be able to make the drawing, make the parts, make the testing, and modify the analysis method if necessary. So we could actually, with that, close the development cycle within 1 day. And if you just outsource one piece, it goes from 1 day to weeks.
Exactly.
And that's why it's so good to have a tool where you can have a small crew inside the company that can learn the business, they can use the tool, and then they can respond very quickly to changes. But then you create another very interesting bottleneck, and that is the testing side of it. We become very efficient in IT on launching new solutions and developing.
Yeah.
But we still have a lot of things to do when it comes to automating and simplifying testing when we launch something new.
Let's come back to that later, maybe.
Yep.
But I would like to refer to one thing. You just said that you build the team that is responsible for flow applications development inside your organization, and you are like 500 people organization. 7. How many subsidiary sites do you have? 7.
It's 7 sites in 5 different countries and 500 employees.
And subsidiary companies. So it's a whole like constellation of and the complication. And how big the team that develops these applications is? I'm expecting like, I don't know, 7 people, 10 people.
There are actually 2.5 besides me doing this. So it's a very small team.
Yeah.
We still have a lot more requests than we can actually do, which I think is positive in relation to what you said before. People stop asking.
Yeah.
They still keep asking us. We can't do everything at once.
Yeah.
And we also have to take care, because when you change in a process, you have to also, okay, we're going to change the process here. But will that have impact on the upstream or downstream part of the process? To figure out that, so you don't fix one problem, don't fix one problem, and then you have created 3 new ones.
Okay, which means also that the more applications you have and you build, the more dependencies you have, and it brings this testing to life, because now you must do the regression tests, I guess, right? To check it, everything.
So the view I have of doing these things is that the first thing you have to do is to learn, understand what's going on. Yeah. And then if you want to change it, you have to innovate. You have to come up with a new solution. But if you stop there, you're going to create a popcorn machine of things going on everywhere, and you lose control. So you have to start to standardize. And then after that, the next step is to simplify. If you look at any automation that takes place in the industry, you have to simplify the processes before you can automate them. And it's the same thing in IT. And then you can automate. And then is when the real impact comes.
Look, you said standardize and simplify, which I like. And I'll come back to that, I hope. The thing is that you described it as a process. So is this process running only in the, I would call it, design phase, where regular users don't see the results? Or it's divided into like several deployment phases where you actually deliver something to the real users? Like, for instance, it's standardized but not simplified yet. You deliver to users, you learn from their experience, and then you simplip, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't happen only in your laboratory, but it's like in connection with real users.
If you really want to understand how the tools you have created is helping the business, it has to go out into the business and have the actual people that are supposed to use this tool to use it. And that's where there's a saying in our company, since we're in automotive, that you have to go to look where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. And it's exactly the same analogy in IT. So Look, but I think it wouldn't be doable. I mean, the simplification of the process. We say process, but there is a huge part that is supported by application, right? Let me quickly explain the area that you support with these applications. So there is an ERP system in the background. It's IFS, right? It's like official.
Yeah.
And then you have Novacura Flow on top of it. And of course, a bunch of other applications. We might refer to that or not. But then we talk about processes such as inventory operations, right? Yeah. Shipment, deliveries management, probably. So end-to-end production, right? Like from the material to the finished goods. Are there any other processes, like financial processes, supported by the tools? Something to refer to?
We have not yet ventured into finance when it comes to using low-code tools. We have it in document management, we have it in HR, and a few other places. Yeah. Finance is, that's an interesting thing, because finance is very much controlled by laws and regulations. Yeah. So they have very stable processes, and I think that because of that, the ERP vendors are actually really good at supporting those processes, because they're standardized.
And you must really follow the regulations. So if you do that internally, you will be constantly, adjusting it to the regulations. Yeah. But you support the core processes. I think warehousing, production, these are the processes that build the core value. So it's good that you focus on that. And if you could improve 1% here, it has much bigger impact on the overall company, you know, efficiency than if you improve the financial processes by 10%, right? So
exactly.
It's a good
and it's when you come to the automate step in this cycle of improving how you do things, you really have to think about that. Okay, automation, to make that provide value often requires a certain volume. If there's something you do every week that takes 10 minutes, then you don't automate it. But if it's something that happens 1,000 times a day, it should definitely look for an automation.
And I'm curious if you share the same observation. You know, I used to be the process optimization expert in my past, and I was asking people about their daily problems, and they usually bring up the problems that actually take them maybe 7 hours, you know, in total in one particular day, and they remember these things, and it could be like the year closing procedure, right? When you ask the accountant, and they say, please help me do something with year closing procedure. It takes me 8 hours to consolidate two stupid reports. Yes, but in fact, much more important is the invoice acceptance click button that happens 10,000 times a year. And if you count the seconds all together, multiplied by number of accountants. But what I'm trying to say is that people usually, when you ask them about their problems, they usually point out things that are very rare, but really like, you know, bother them. And they forget about things that happen, you know, on regular basis, but take short time, right?
And that's where I apply what I learned when I had a chief engineer role. I had that besides a lot of other roles, and then I realized that I was no longer the one that was supposed to come up with the answers. My job as a chief engineer was to make sure that we ask all the correct questions, and that applies here as well. You can't just ask people what takes the most time. Once they answer that, you have to ask them, how often does this happen?
Okay.
And then you realize, okay, year close happens once per year, it takes 7 hours. That's 7 hours per year. Do you have
for one person maybe?
For one person. Do you have something that happens more often that takes a lot of time? So it's very much down to being able to ask the right questions and make people think in that direction. It's
very connected to like 5 why methodology, right? You try to find the real root of the problem. Is it you who asks the question, or there are other people in your team, maybe this 2.5?
Yeah, I try to. Of course, it's not a nice thing to try, but of course I try to bring my philosophy of doing things to other people. And I don't mind if they object to it, because when people object to changes, it could be useful information. You can learn from that, because sometimes and quite often the objections, they have real value. And then you learn something new that you didn't know before.
That's cool. Yeah, and so you say you ask the right questions. You're never like satisfied with the answer. You need to like dive into that. But do you also measure things and problems? You said like 5 a day, and this is just declaration. It's 5. It happens 5 times a day. Now, do you also try to measure the processes and how often the things happen? How long that it really takes?
Of course.
Yeah.
And especially if you have issues you need to troubleshoot, and it's very important to get reliable data. Because if you ask a person using an IT system, is this system fast enough? You will always get the answer, no. But then you have to say, okay, maybe I have to measure here and get some idea of, or ask them to supply information about what is actually time consuming, what is the response time? Can we see some pattern in what's going on if you're not happy with how responsive the system is? But in the end, the best way is, of course, to measure it, to get actual data.
Okay, you referred to things that happen in applications, and that's one part. But I was more thinking about real processes. By real process, I mean the warehouseman could claim that it takes too long to bring this box from one shelf to another, and so on and so on. Do you also help business measure these processes, like real processes, outside of application, I would say?
At this stage, we don't have objective data for that, but that's of course something we would like to create in the future. And it would obviously be an advantage if we have a tool that would make it easy for us. What we have been doing so far in terms to actual measurements of responsiveness in our ERP system, all of it is homegrown.
Okay.
We inject a few extra lines of code in Flow, Then we write to the database, and then we use Click to analyze the result.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So it could also, I mean, you could also build additional applications just to measure things, right? So it's good.
And then it becomes a little bit dangerous there when you start to measure how people use their time. Not everyone is appreciating when you do that.
Obviously, obviously. So it's better to connect the measurements with their daily job and just as a consequence of the daily records, measure the efficiency and speed and so on. We've been talking about little changes that you implemented in your company, like this Alt plus F4 problem. If we could focus for a while on like bigger optimizations that you have implemented, like maybe like the whole digitization program that you have in your company, you eliminate paper and you replace it with applications, so on. Could you please present some optimizations that you achieved, or things like that?
One good thing about these tools that are now available, these low-code tools like Flow, is that they enable you to create much more user-friendly interfaces on top of the ERP system. So we created those for our shipping area, our internal logistics, our operations, and so on. And basically that enables you to present not only the people with a nice user interface, it also provides them with the information they need. You get rid of clutter, and they also get access to exactly the operations they need to do. Not more, not less.
Yeah, I think it's important to not give them more, because it's the kind of embedded feature in ERP systems that it gives actually too much to the user, right?
Yeah. And what happens then is that this tool becomes like a standardization motor. It helps you to standardize the processes, because you're very quickly going to see that either you get highly complex code behind it to be able to cover all the different exceptions that exist, or you're going to run into situations where you actually realize that, hey, we can't do this using our tool. We have to go back to work directly in the ERP system. And then you have an indication, okay, here we have something which is an exception. And maybe we should think about, is this an exception that actually provides business value to the company? Or is this something that should be a target for standardization?
So sometimes by building the application, I would compare Novacura Flow and the way our applications work to the analogy to like real world, where ERP is like an open field, and you as a user, you have your bicycle or maybe a bike, right? And you can ride wherever you want. Now, when you have Novacura Flow, it's like you build a road and paths for particular users, for particular roads, and you're not allowed to enter the other zone, another area, because there is a path. So meaning you define the process, and you have no options. Sometimes you have a crossroad and you can turn left or right. So these are all the options. And probably the more options you define, the more exceptions you see, because there is always an exception to exception. So I guess when you do that, you also see that your processes in your organization are not that standardized as you first imagined, and it drives the standardization itself, right?
It's a very good way of identifying how standardized or de-standardized it is. And it's a very simple rule. For each yes/no answer you have, you get a 2 up to n number of combinations. So if you have 8 different yes or no answers, you have 256 possible combinations. And then it becomes complex. And then you can imagine a risk that you have already existing, meaning that unless you have this very well described and documented in your processes right now, it is depending on people knowing what is supposed to happen. Well, for this particular customer, I know I have to do this extra thing. But if that person is sick, will that actually happen?
Probably not. And it's good, because if there is if you forget about some variants of the process when you develop it, you will immediately see it. Now, if there are these forgotten paths, if you don't have application like Novacura Flow and you just have ERP, you will see the results at the end of the quarter, when in the report you see some disruptors, and that's the problem, that you find this like not standardized solutions at the source, and you see it immediately, and you can talk about it, and you can decide if we still accept this path, or we say no, you must follow the main procedure, right? So I like
that's another thing that is good when you can standardize things, because it means that you reduce the risk of errors that has propagated through the organization, because sometimes a mistake made up here in the process will not be discovered until you're all the way down here. And then it has become much more urgent to fix and probably also much more expensive to fix.
Yeah. And you said about, you told us about these exceptions, and you have also subsidiary companies and you have multiple sites. So do you also observe that this is also the problem itself that generates these exceptions?
It does.
So you need to adjust processes to specific needs of particular site or subsidiary company, right?
We would prefer not to, but sometimes there are valid reasons for adapting the processes. For instance, there could be legal requirement, there could be environmental health or safety requirements you have to meet. Or it could just be the fact that you have a different balance in different countries between the cost for doing automation in IT and the cost for the workforce, which leads you to do things in a different way.
Or I guess the scale of operations,
Exactly.
the products they build, it could be different, and then you need to adjust the process. I'm not, referring to different sites, and it's just a reason for changes itself. It's because they have different business model, and different environment. You refer to regulations and so on. And I must say that I think it's doable for you because you have local platform and this local team of developers, this big 2.5 persons team. And that's why you are able to adjust it to specific needs of particular sites or organizations. If you don't have it, guess what happens? You don't have these processes very well defined in the application, and you become your application looks like the ERP. Everyone can do everything because in case your business requires some other paths, you will be able to do that because you have all options in front of you. If you decide to define this particular specific processes and the paths, you must be aware you need to accept these exceptions unless you standardize processes, but you can't standardize it all the time, right? So it's a challenging, I think it's a good strategy, very good strategy for your company, but also very challenging for you, because once you enter that path, this strategy, you can't ignore exceptions. You must react on them very quickly.
That's absolutely true. And that's why the company I work in, we really love challenges.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's not the problem. We really like to take on the challenges.
What makes you, it'll be very personal, but what makes you motivated? Because, at some day when you receive 10 emails from different sources, and you see we need a national exception and we need an improvement here, you might be overwhelmed and you think, why am I doing it, right? What drives you to...
I'm going to go back very long in time to talk about this. I grew up in a rural area in Sweden, in a very small village, in the municipality of Gnosjö, which is famous in Sweden for having a lot of small companies that seems to be able to reinvent themselves all over the time. And after I finished 9th grade, I worked during the summer vacation or summer holiday from school in the company where my father worked. And during that time I was there, the founder's son, the company was founded 80 years ago, and the founder's son stepped in to talk to people, and he was in his 80s, and it was actually his son that ran the company. And then he told me a story. He said that, well, you should know this, back in the 30s we were making these curtain hooks. And we sold them, and we charged 36 kronas for 1,000. And then we got a German competitor, and they sold them for 32. So we had to go to 28, and then the Germans went to 24. And in the end, we sold them for 6 for 1,000 pieces, and we were still making money. And this is my big motivation, this looking for ways to achieve more with less. That's what drives me.
But it's very uncommon for IT directors to think like that, because I see, and I'm impressed by that you're so connected to the company vision, the primary vision, that you're a part of the company. It's very unique, actually, and you really operate in between. I would say you're much closer to business than to IT.
Yeah, I would agree.
When I look at your values and your goals, you think about the common goals for the company, and where IT is just your tool, your ability. Is it correct?
That's correct. IT was a hobby of mine. Then it became my profession, because I realized that it could provide value to what we actually did. Because our customers doesn't pay us for having the best IT system in the world. They pay us for the performance we deliver in our products.
So the cost factor is just one thing, but we can easily convert the standardized processes into the quality of your products, right? You can't simply. You probably said that the other day that you know if your suspension has not been delivered appropriate time before the race, you fail. I mean, you have no second option, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of presence in racing, and I actually worked supporting racing activities myself. And of course, performance is the first thing you think about. But there are 3 other very important things that you learn from racing.
Yeah.
One is reliability, because to finish first you have to finish. If things break during the race, you're not going to get the podium place.
Yeah, yeah.
And the second thing is to respect the timeline. The race will start at Sunday 2 p.m. no matter if you're ready or not.
Yeah.
That's the second thing. And then the first thing, which is very much defining Öhlins as a company, that's the will to win. We have a saying that second place is the first loser. And you can actually apply that a lot to business as well, because being the second best option is not going to generate you a lot of revenue.
Let's imagine a tendering process and you're the second on the list. You don't get the contract, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, exactly this. We talked about, you know, different process optimizations, and I prepared some additional questions. What I observe very often in companies, in large companies, is the problem with the master data.
Yeah.
Especially in organizations like yours, where you have like a lot of sites and subsidiary companies. You probably have different versions of ERP systems in these companies. Is it true? Yeah. So probably you have the same problem with the master data synchronization. For those who don't know what I mean by that, it's like, in your case, it's like the catalog of parts and probably price lists and the other, like, all the related data, the core data that you have, not transactions. Do you also have this problem? You probably have, but have you improved that process, like the synchronization and so on?
Because I think it's really a waste of people's talent and time to have them to sit and manually update, read information in one window on the screen and then type in another to maintain price lists or availability of parts. It's much better to automate these things in the background.
Yeah.
And then you get the stable process. You get rid of a lot of manual work. You eliminate human error.
Yeah.
And you also get the ability from that tool to generate lists on, okay, here we have this master data, but this can't be correct. There are pieces missing that we need to be able to serve our customers. And you can get a list of that and then you can act on it.
So do you achieve that? You referred to like 2 windows. Do you achieve that by implementing RPA tools that copy it in the background?
This is a place where you really have to use some kind of low-code tool that you can control yourself, because you have to adapt to the way business is doing all the time. And then you can't send a ticket to an ERP vendor and have a reply back in 6 months.
Yeah,
it has to happen in days or weeks when you need to do changes.
So do I assume it correctly, you use Novacura Flow also to integrate these ERP systems and exchange master data in that context, right?
Yeah. And I have to say, to some extent, tools like Flow could be considered being a drug, because once you had your first fix, you just want more.
Interesting. I should use that in my marketing materials. It's a good analogy. I think it's a positive drug and without negative consequences as well. Let's take a look at my notes. I think what we should also include in the discussion is, and again, I observe this, I get this opinion from our customers a lot, that once they started implementing these applications in Novacura Flow with the typical step-by-step approach that you get together with with these applications, the time for onboarding users, new employees, was shortened like dramatically. Do you also share the same?
We see that as well, that to train someone to use the native user interface in ERP, which basically is a lot of field where you can type information and you have to move, you have maybe tens of tabs you have to move around, know where should I modify, where can't I modify, and so on. It takes weeks to train someone to do even operations on the shop floor or in shipping. Once you get those over into a tool like Flow, low-code tool, and you can provide the right user interface, you can cut down the time it takes for someone to be able to work independently from weeks to days or half a day. So it's a huge difference in the onboarding. And you get much better quality because there will be less mistakes made.
Or even these mistakes are impossible because they are. Good tool really limits you.
Yeah, exactly.
It prevents you from like inconsistent moves and And again, it's this analogy to the open field where you really need to know where to cross the road, and you need to be very aware. You need to be trained if you have just open field in your bicycle. If you instead have a road and a bridge that crosses the road, which is exactly the process-oriented application built in low code, right? It guides you through one point through the road. Then you don't need to know how to, how to plan the route, right? So,
but it's still important, even with those kind of tools, that you have a philosophy on how to use them, an anticipation of what you want to achieve with them, so it doesn't become a popcorn machine that things pop up like this, and in the end there's nobody owning it, and then you find, okay, I have something here that someone wrote in Flow, but who is using it? What business value is it providing? So you have to make sure that you have an ownership, and that you have kind of a process that when somebody comes with something new, that you evaluate, okay, does this make sense to do? And if it makes sense to do, is it something we should do now, or is it something that we should fit into a larger plan?
Who asked this question? Is this you or people from business who are educated to ask these questions?
I think at this time, I'm the one with the most questions, but I hope I also have other people asking the same questions, but maybe not related to the ERP system, because the ERP system is one component of getting products ready to ship. They ask the same questions, but also, okay, how should we do with this machine? Should we change this machine? Do we need a new one? Yeah. Should we improve in this area here? Course, what do we need to replace?
But when we refer to flow applications, they are highly connected with what happens on the shop floor and in the warehouse. So I don't separate it, actually. It's like when you talk about put away strategy in a warehouse, you should think about the application that will lead the warehouse man to the right shelf, and so it's connected for me, and so it's currently you who is the kind of blocker of too many initiatives in a positive sense. You try to evaluate them, measure it, classify, and sometimes sometimes you have a situation where the requesting business person, after several questions, says, okay, let's give up. It doesn't make sense. Let's focus on something else, right?
Yep, that happens from time to time, that you have to take that decision, that we realize that this idea sounded good, but after evaluation, it wasn't that impressive anymore. And that is the kind of interaction you have to have all the time if you want to provide business value from an IT department.
And I really like it because, I believe we don't have unlimited resources. It's really hard to find and onboard highly skilled and motivated people, right? Sharing the same values and so on, so on, so on. So the team is always limited, and one of the methods to achieve the goals, the big goals that companies have, is the ability to eliminate unnecessary initiatives, right? So that's what you're saying. It's like you not only deliver the good stuff and optimizations, but you also focus on eliminating those that have lower priority, just to take care of these important
this
ones.
is a method that was written a lot about. I think it was Jim Collins who wrote about it in his book, From Good to Great, that all companies make to-do list, but you also have to make a stop doing list. This is things that we should stop doing.
Or even strike out from the, exactly.
So and that's why I'm talking about when somebody wants to bring in a new tool, you should really look for, okay, if we bring in a new tool, which tool can we eliminate?
It's I think another example of that methodology, I would say. Is this only your department methodology, or do you observe it in the entire organization, in the entire company?
The same philosophy applies everywhere.
So same values, same philosophy. Yeah. That's good. I mean, it's.
Although I have to say that maybe we could do a better job of getting rid of older products, but you still want to serve the customer, and if there is a demand out there, even for an old product, we continue to produce it.
Yeah, sure. Look, I probably have 2 more questions. It always happens that when I say 2, I'll have 4 or something. But one of these is we address this podcast to people mainly to people like you who drive changes in their organizations, who struggle with the same problems as you described here. And so we call them change agents. And I think it would be good if instead of being only positive and happy with everything we do, if you refer to something that really bothers you, that you have a lot of challenges and problems. What really bothers you? What's the constant problem that you observe, and sometimes you become frustrated? If you could unhide it.
There are actually 2 things which are annoying, and it's kind of things that actually make me wake up at night sometimes. And one is the master data quality. it happens so often that when we don't want to do an initiative, we find out that the first thing we have to do is to make sure that we clear up our master data and have valid data in the system. And sometimes it's difficult even to find someone in an organization who wants to own that master data who isn't really functional. It's there because we have a legal requirement, but it still has to be there.
Yeah.
And the second thing that bugs me, that's all the time we're spending testing and the problems we're having getting enough time or stealing time from the organization to do the testing. Those are my two major frustrations at the time.
When you say organization, you mean also real end users?
Yeah, of course.
They should be involved,
because
right?
I can have people in IT do a unit testing of a new function to verify that we have built what we thought we were supposed to build. But we can't verify that what we built is actually what the user or the person
really
asked us to build.
Yeah.
And then you always have the nasty topic of regression testing. That when you change something, you have to make sure that you haven't broken something else. And that is really tedious and boring. And that's something, I've been looking for ways to automate it now for years. I haven't found it yet, but I won't stop looking.
It's the continuous improvement approach, yeah. I think because the testing thing is more important for me. Believe me, we will end shortly. The thing is that, you know, whenever you find new ways to improve it and users come back to you with some criticism and saying, you know, you implemented this new feature, but we also expected this and this, it's quite okay. But whenever you forget about some dependencies and you generate problems in the operations, you know, when you actually use the application, that's only your problem. Because everyone expects from you that this will be compatible with everything that has, you know, been created previously. And that's the biggest problem, because the regression test is probably the only option. And unfortunately, the more applications you will have, the bigger
it becomes. So it's like rolling this snowball in front of you that just becomes bigger.
My observation is that if the team that develops the application and probably also tests this application before you ship it to the users, if this is just 2.5 persons, I like this 2.5, then probably the team should be a bit bigger. If you increase it by 50%, it's still 3.5 persons. It's probably the solution for you. But yeah, I think the number, even if you have the problem that users are not 100% satisfied with what you have delivered, you can quickly solve it, because once again, you have low-code platform. Do you have situations where you sit with the user in front of the designer part of our platform and you show him a diagram and he shows, I need this field here ordered by, I don't know, quantity or something?
No, we practice a lot of Genshi Genbutsu. Actually, if we have a major launch of new features, I make sure that the developers are on site and where the application is used, so they can see exactly what happens for themselves. And many times, if it's minor things they've forgotten, they can fix it in minutes.
Yeah, and this is exactly what drives you towards the success, because it's connected with reality, and then people use it because it's convenient for them. More convenient maybe even than the previous paper-based method, right? It's just simple, convenient. And I believe, and this is my philosophy maybe, but if you take care of these real users, if you show them that you really care and this is really prepared for them and to be convenient for them, they will use it in the way you designed it. If they see that you don't care, it's inefficient, it's visible at the first glance that it could be done better, they will never accept the application and they will find a way for, like, you know, workarounds and to not use it and so on. So okay, look, it's time to finalize this, I think, fantastic discussion. If you have a young team member in your team and you would like to give him like free suggestions, free guidelines, what would it be, considering the, you know, process optimization challenges?
I think the first thing is to mind the culture. You have to understand the company culture to be able to drive changes. And sometimes driving changes means that you have to change the culture, and that's a real venture to do that. And if you don't mind the company culture, you know the saying that the culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch and dinner? So it will eat you alive if you don't mind the culture. The second thing I would tell them is that make sure before you start to fix something or create something new that you have fully grasped the problem or the capability that is needed. I think it was Einstein that has been attributed with saying that if I have 1 hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes understanding it and the remaining 5 minutes solving it.
I can confirm that's Einstein,
Yeah. And the first thing I would tell them is that you're going to face resistance, but use it. Sometimes resistance to change actually provides you with great new knowledge that is good to know. Then you're always going to run across people that are going to object to changes for no obvious or no valid reason. And that is also good to know, because those kind of persons, don't waste your energy on them. You have to move around them or ignore them, because they're not going to help you improve.
Yeah, you must be prepared for that. Otherwise you will get stuck in like trying to please everyone, right? I mean, great summary. I have nothing to add or subtract from that. I'm really thankful, and it was a great discussion. A lot of good inspirations from you today. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks.